Broadcasting from the Symphony Studios in Marietta, Georgia, it's time for the High Tech Women Podcast, brought to you by Symphony Technology Solutions. Listen in as we speak with and learn from inspiring women who have stepped up and stepped into careers in technology and construction. Now, here are your hosts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of the High Tech Women Podcast, brought to you by Symphony Technology Solutions. I'm one of your hosts today, Katie Galley, and I am joined by our fearless leader, our CEO, Johnny Fittner. How you doing, Johnny?
I'm doing great, Katie. Thanks for letting me shadow you today.
Well, you're going to do more than shadow, of course, because as our listeners might see, this is our first time co-hosting an episode together. So, Johnny, thank you for your time. I'm super excited to dive in.
Me too.
Good. And of course, to kick us off, one of the big things we're doing this month is being a woman-owned DBE ourselves. We've launched the High Tech Women Podcast to come around and really lift up incredible women in the tech, entrepreneurship, construction, business space. And so we're really excited today in our Symphony studio. We have with us founder and CEO of SafeFi Technologies and the host of Connected with Laurie, Laurie Caruso. How are you doing, Laurie?
I am fantastic. Ladies, thank you for having me. How are you?
Of course, we're doing great. Yes, thank you so much for stopping by our studio today.
Absolutely. I'm psyched to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here, Laurie. And so just to kick it off, can you share with us and just kind of walk through your professional journey to date and how you specifically found yourself in the company that you have today?
Absolutely. It's actually quite a funny story, I have to say. So we're not going to go into the amount of years I've been doing this, but we'll just say it's about 30, just give or take.
Yeah.
And right out of college, I actually was senior year, I bought a car and it had an install phone, cellular phone in it. I was so excited. I mean, it was like, what is this? I can't wait to get it activated so I could start, obviously using it. Well, I went into a corner store. I think there was only like one store per state, and tried to get it activated. And then I realized, oh my gosh, how can I afford this? Cellular phones back in the 90s? I didn't realize it was going to be so expensive. So as I'm sitting in the waiting room, I said, how do I get this for free? Is there a way? And the woman says, well, you have to work here. And I said, oh, I have to work here? Are you hiring? And they're like, well, I don't know. And I said, is your manager here? I could speak to your manager maybe. And the next thing I know, I'm being escorted out back. I have an interview that day. I'm in jeans. And the next thing I know, I have a job at this company in New Hampshire, and I have my phone for free. And I was so excited. So back in the late 90s, I started in cellular, and I can tell you it has been incredible ever since. What a changing industry, I have to say.
I gotta say, after talking with you for just a few minutes, I'm not even slightly surprised that that's how you got that job. Going in there boldly.
Yeah, there was a little bold act to it. There's no question.
Yeah.
But as a matter of fact, my manager from back in the 90s just had her birthday yesterday. So it's great because I still can pick up that phone and still have conversations with my old teams. And, I say this industry has changed so tremendously. I mean, it really has. I mean, back then, we had cell phone towers. I think there was only one tower or two towers per county. And you had to drive to get your phone service. Now, you're looking at buildings, you're looking at, all this infrastructure. And if my phone doesn't work, if I walk 2 seconds away, I'm having a heart attack. So the difference in this technology is insane.
Well, Laurie, why don't you tell us what you do at SafeFi Technologies?
Yeah. So, being in the industry, I've worked, for the carriers for a long time. And then I started getting into building the infrastructures, working for integrators. And then I got into what we call the investment side, the third party operating side, which is virtually who's going to own the network, who's going to pay for the network. So I started seeing all these different trends in, working in so many different fields in telecom. And there was always one thing that I realized that people weren't taking on, and that was public safety infrastructure. Now, I don't know if you realize this, but in most buildings, you need to be able to prove that there's radio coverage for first responder networks, being public safety. And I started seeing that, all these buildings needed to have it. People were starting to get into it, but they didn't know how to build it. And they didn't certainly know how to consult to the business owner, the property owners, how to do it. And where, my father growing up was a firefighter. And I'll never forget as a child listening to this scanner, and my father off he goes to this fire, and my mother would be sitting on the edge of her seat trying to figure out, is he alive? Is he dead? What's going on with his fire? And as a child, I realized, hearing the lack of coverage back then in the 70s to today, it wasn't much different. I'm like, why is that? So now you couple that where you have to install it. You have to show that it's there, but yet it doesn't really exist. And there's still so many issues. How can I help that industry? How can I help it become successful? And how can I help save lives? That's where I started SafeFi Technologies.
Wow.
We really need that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, Laurie, that's really a neat thing to reflect back on your childhood and kind of pinpoint a time what kind of brought you to where you are today. So reflecting back too, I mean, deciding to branch off and make SafeFi and really dive into this industry that you saw this need for. At that time, I mean, growing up, was there something that signified to you that maybe you knew you were going to start your own business at some point, or that like kind of sparked that entrepreneurial desire in you?
A really great question. And as a matter of fact, so, working for companies all of my life for the most part, realizing that every single time I had an idea, that idea was either taken and called somebody else's, or it was, no, it's not the right time. And, realizing too, you are challenged out there because you've got so many innovative ideas and so many thought processes that would cross my mind, potentially my mind all the time. I needed to do something with that. And, the more I started, working out in that workforce and understanding what life was about, the more I realized I needed to take this on myself. I needed to have ownership on my own. I needed to make things happen faster than others were doing it. And I just needed to take the plunge. And when I say plunge, it was an entire plunge into an ice cube filled pool for the most part. But, I look back, and I started SafeFi about a year ago. I look back and it's the best thing I ever did. Best thing, hands down.
Love that.
Good.
Yeah.
So Laurie, what piece of advice would you give to a young person wanting to enter into the tech space?
Well, technology, and I say this, and I know you had mentioned in the podcast, I say this all the time, technology, it changes at the speed of light, and it's constant, and it's a great place to be because most wanted to, do something that's positive in this world, and technology is that positive. And it's that evolution where it, like I said, it changes all the time. It's just innovating. It's just an amazing place to be. And when I look at, people following their hearts, it could be a doctor, it could be a school teacher. Those are all amazing professions. But for me, looking at the high tech space and seeing where it's going to go in another 10 years, I just had a podcast where we're talking about 6G, and I'm like, I can't even wrap my hands around 5G. So we were talking about 6G and now what that means for our future. It is so incredible to see where we're going to be. And I always say, get ready to be amazed. It's pretty amazing.
That is great. I mean, talking about something like 6G when we're, trying to grasp 5G, but that's the nature of technology, right? It's ever evolving. We have to constantly be ahead of it because you have to anticipate what's going to come tomorrow with actually not fully knowing what's happening even today.
No question. And, you look back and you say, okay, well, I remember when we had, the cell phones in the bag, remember those attaches. To today, we're wearing our, devices on our watch, on our wrist. And when we were talking about watches and wearing wearable devices that I could communicate with back in the 90s, I would have said, no way. There's just no way. Yeah. And now we're talking about having a hologram next to me and being able to touch, being able to feel things, being able to see things that wouldn't necessarily be here. It would be virtual. And having those conversations now of what that means in 10 years is just intriguing. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
Laurie, you're probably too young to remember the old Dick Tracy cartoon.
I'm not too young, and I totally remember it, but don't tell anybody.
Yeah, he was way ahead of his time, and now we've caught up. We've caught up to Dick Tracy.
We've caught up, and so that's why I say, what is it going to mean in another 10 years? What are we going to be like, having holograms of people now? Like, I want to call up my mom. Oh my gosh, hi mom, on my watch. Yeah, pretty incredible.
Wow.
So Laurie, I mean, in pursuit of that, trying to, stay ahead of the conversations, and too with SafeFi, in pursuit of that, you said you have your own podcast, where you kind of have those conversations. So talk to us a little bit about that. Kind of do a little plug. Tell us who the nature of it. If it's just you, do you interview people?
Yeah, thank you. As a matter of fact, so when I started SafeFi Technologies 2 years ago, well, it was about a year ago actually. Concept came 2 years ago. One of my dearest friends in the industry told me, you really need to set the stage. You need to be able to be out there communicating what your brand is and what your message is. And so putting thought to that, how do I do that? I mean, I can go to shows, I can tell people who I am, I can sit among 10,000 people trying to raise my hand so I can communicate what I do. Then I started realizing, I got to get up on stage for sure. So I started moderating panels. I started, being on panels. So then, the expert part started to come out. People started recognizing me for that, and then branding the company. And then, as that's continuing, when I launched the company, I was on an interview with a magazine in my industry, Connected Real Estate Magazine. And I had a great interview with them. And the next thing I know, I'm actually out in LA at a show. And I said, can I have this mic? I just want to take this mic around because I'm having so much fun. I want to go and interview others, because the way I look at it, if they don't have the stage, they can't spread their message. So how can I help them do that? So let's take the mic and have that happen. So I ended up doing that. Next thing I know, they're on air talent. And I'm like, okay, are you sure? Is this a deal? Like, are we a partner? And then the next thing I know, Connect with Laurie started podcasting, and virtually, again, just taking their stories, company stories, and letting them go. Talk about your story, brand your story, and then I'll help you put it on all the podcasting channels. I'll get it out on YouTube. I'll help you spread it. And that's how we pretty much started the podcast show.
Love that. And
Wow.
I love to putting yourself out there and being willing to walk through those doors of opportunity. So really having no idea what it was going to be like or what it could turn into, but just continuing to say yes, and see where it brought you today.
That's it. Continuing to say yes. And honestly, getting creative, never thinking that you couldn't do something. I mean, that's the thing. I got out of my comfort zone so many times starting this company. And, I thought of this, I'm a CEO. Whoa, I've never been a CEO before. But then I'm like, wait, I'm a CFO. I'm a CTO. I'm like literally the C-suite. And I didn't have any experience to get into any of those. And now I'm doing it, and challenging, but fun.
Very inspiring, Laurie.
Thank you. Thank you. And so are you ladies. I'll tell you, I love this podcast.
Thank you.
Well, so if someone wanted to get in touch with you, Laurie, and learn more about you, how might they do that?
So I have a website, www.safefitech.com. So you can go and take a peek at what I do as far as the public safety side. I've also started to branch out as well because, being in the cellular industry, dealing with carriers, the Verizons, AT&Ts, T-Mobiles of the world, it's a challenge to be able to understand how the process works when you want to build infrastructure. So I started also coupling that with consulting to help business owners get through the carrier side and be able to build the networks in their buildings in addition to the public safety. So you can go to my website, have that conversation for that, and then connect with Laurie. I'm also on all the podcasting channels through my podcast as well. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on social media, so look me up. I would be happy to talk to people. I love mentoring and I love sponsoring, especially those strong women out there. Absolutely, I would love to have the ability to help.
Thank you all for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. To learn more about Symphony, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube at Symphony Technology Solutions, and on Instagram at Symphony Tech Solutions. Never forget that wherever your pursuits take you, cling to the truth that you were absolutely made for a time such as this. See you on our next episode.